discipleship training class. We're talking about what it means to be a disciple. How do we be disciples who make disciples, who make disciples? But before we can get into any of that, of the reproducing of disciples and of making disciples, we've got to consider, what does it mean to be a disciple? And if we're talking about what does it mean to be a disciple, I think the first question that we have to address and that we have to jump into is, what is the heart of being a disciple? See, we're talking about what does it mean to just be a disciple. Really, in kind of dictionary terms, it talks about being committed to something, following something, giving yourself over to something. And if we're going to give ourselves over to something, it means really we're devoting ourselves, we're giving our heart. So then what is the heart of being a disciple? Again, before we get into any sort of task, before we get into any sort of practicalities, we have to address the heart of the matter. We have to address, what is the heart of being a disciple? And I would say that the heart of being a disciple is being with God. See, when we look at the Bible and we look at Jesus' sacrifice and we look at creation, the heart of being a disciple, the heart of being a devoted follower of Jesus Christ, the heart of being in relationship with God is about being with God. It's not about doing for God. It's not about producing for God. There's no striving in it. It's a matter of being, and it's a matter of being from our very heart. One of maybe my strongest conviction in life. Actually, let me just throw that down. My strongest conviction in life. And when I try to explain this to people, the best that I can give you is that it just sits here. Like there's an anchor in the depth of my soul. There is a conviction in the core of who I am. Perhaps the greatest conviction that I walk in my life is that we were created by the Creator God and designed to be in relationship with Him. That's it. Like it sits right here. The anchoring point of the entirety of my life tells me that you, I, and every other person out there were created by the Creator God to be in relationship with God. Therefore, the heart of being a disciple, the heart of being one devoted to following Jesus, is about being with God, about being in relationship with the Creator God. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 29, verse 13, it says, "The Lord says, these people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips." And here's the deal, don't mistake. Our mouths and our actions and our lips should be proclaiming the things of God, drawing us closer to God, and talking about the things of God. But then what he says, and he addresses it in such a way that points out the problem, it says, but their hearts are far from me. It's not that our lips and our mouths shouldn't be proclaiming and honoring, but it's more so about the fact that they were proclaiming and honoring, but their hearts were far. Which tells us that the point of being in relationship with God is that our heart should beat with His heart, that our heart should align with His heart, that it's more about our heart than it is about our mouth and our lips. Make no mistake, when our heart's in the right place with God, our lips and our mouths will follow. But he's addressing, they were saying the right things, maybe doing the right things, but their heart was far from Him. Their worship of me is based merely on human rules that they have been taught. That's not the heart of being a disciple. The heart of being a disciple isn't about rules that have been taught. It's about a heart that is longing and desiring and devoted to being with God. It's about spending time daily in His presence. It's about honestly spending time daily in His Word, because that's the primary way that He speaks. It's the primary tool that He's given us to get to know Him. It's to spend time reading His Word to understand His character and His nature. The heart of being a disciple spends time in prayer. The heart of being a disciple spends time in silence, listening for the voice of God in their life. The heart of being a disciple is absolute, utter devotion with the entirety of our lives to Jesus, to following Him, to being with Him, to spending time with Him. And then out of that flows everything else. Out of a heart that's close, then would flow maybe some rules of how to worship, and maybe our lips and our mouths honoring. But first and foremost, we fix the heart posture and devotion to God. The heart of being a disciple is being with God. As I read through the Bible, which I do on a daily basis, this past, probably 7 months, I've been in a new kind of round of reading the Bible, just meaning I've been in a new reading plan. And a lot of it, I finished up around in the New Testament. And so then a lot of the last few months have been in the Old Testament, which if you know me, I love the Old Testament. And so there's a couple of things that, honestly, I would say I feel like have kind of shown me the heart of God in a different way as I've been reading this round of the Old Testament. And so I want to propose to you just some different examples in the Bible that lays out the heart of being a disciple and the fact that we were created for a relationship with God. First, let me tell you this, the story of the Bible ends the story of God and his people. As you read Genesis to Revelation, we see that the Bible is about relationship of God and his people. It's about the creation of Adam and Eve and relationship with people and how that gets messed up. And then the calling of God to the nation of Israel to be his people as he leads them out of slavery and into the promised land and desiring to be with them. It continues throughout the entirety of the Old Testament. And the New Testament, we see restoration and relationship with God and his people. And we see ultimately at the end in Revelation that one day we all get to step into a new heaven and a new earth for all of eternity to live out relationship with God as it was intended to be. The Bible is the story of God and his people. And so again, this go round of reading in the Bible, I just feel like the Lord has shown me a couple of different spaces that have highlighted in an even greater way for me the heart of God being relationship. And so the first one that we'll look at, the Bible is the story of God and his people. The first kind of example I want to throw at you is Joseph. If you're not familiar with Joseph, you find his story in the back end of the book of Genesis in the Old Testament. Joseph is one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So Jacob, we often hear people talk about Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. Jacob's name eventually gets changed to Israel, and these become the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph is one of those sons. Joseph, however, was disliked by his brothers, and Joseph was then thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery in Egypt. Joseph winds up in Egypt. He's in slavery. He works his way up. He's working in the house of Potiphar, a well-known official. Potiphar's wife says, "Ooh, Joseph, he's real cute." And so then she makes a pass at Joseph. He declines her. She gets upset. She, tosses out allegations that are untrue. Joseph gets put in prison. Joseph is in prison. He makes friends. He helps his friends in prison. His friends are about to get out, and he says, "Don't forget me when you get out. Help me get out." Joseph's friends get out of prison. Joseph gets left in prison. Eventually, God gives Joseph the ability to interpret a dream for Pharaoh. Joseph raises to prominence in Egypt. And then Joseph's brothers come and are looking for help during a time of famine. They're looking for food. And then Joseph is then restored in relationship with his brothers, restored in relationship with his dad, and helps save the entire nation of Israel in the process. Incredible story. Go read it towards the tail end of the book of Genesis. But here's what I picked up on as I read this time at the tail end of Genesis, reading the story of Joseph, is that Joseph wept. And so I'm reading, and in one chapter, it's like, and Joseph wept. And then I read another chapter, and Joseph wept. And then Joseph wept, and then Joseph wept. I'm like, man, Joseph cried a lot. If you know me well, I actually cry a lot. So maybe that's why it resonated with me. I was like, oof, me and Joseph, it's okay. I cry a lot, it's biblical. But then I began to do some research. And so in the short few chapters that lay out Joseph's story, we see that Joseph wept 7 different times. But where we don't see Joseph weep is in the really hard times. He didn't weep because he was thrown in a pit. He didn't weep because he was enslaved. He didn't weep because he got put in prison. He didn't weep because he was unfairly accused. Those were not the occasions where Joseph wept. Do you know when Joseph wept? Joseph wept when he saw his brothers again for the first time after being separated for so long. Joseph wept when he saw his brother Benjamin, who was the only sibling that shared the same mom with him. Joseph wept when he was reunited with his father. Joseph wept when his father passed away. Joseph wept whenever his brothers came back and they were fully restored into relationship and walking in forgiveness with one another. What that tells us is the importance of relationship to the heart of God. The importance of relationship, not just with one another, but the importance of relationship between us and the Creator God. God was so concerned and is so concerned about relationship with us that he places tender parts of our heart to be able to yearn for relationship, to be able to desire relationship, and to be able to respond in relationship to God the Father. The heart of being a disciple is being with God. And we see the heart of relationship in the Father as we read the story of Joseph. We also see it in the Old Testament and the prophets. The books of the prophets are between Proverbs and the end of the Old Testament. You have the minor prophets, which are the shorter books, and the major prophets, which are the longer books. As I read through the prophets just the last few months, here's what gripped me. The vulnerability of our God crying out for restoration of relationship with his people. Man, as you read it time and time again, God's crying out through the prophets to bring his people back to relationship with him. God's crying out from what I feel like is a broken heart is what it sounds like. And he's like, I know that you've prostituted yourself to other gods. I know that you've worshiped other things. I know that you've walked away. I know that you've had doubt and unbelief and distrust, but just come back to me. Just come back is what we see over and over through every book of the prophets. Just come back and be in relationship with me as I created you to be. I know that the prophets can be a tough stretch to read, but as you read it, can I encourage you to look at it through the lens of the heart of the Creator God calling his people to be with him. The heart of being a disciple is about being with God because that's what we were created for. And then lastly, we see that exemplified and displayed through Jesus in the New Testament. Because Jesus laid down his life to restore relationship for us. We read the Old Testament, it's the story of God and his people and the struggle of their relationship. We read the New Testament and where Jesus comes on the scene and Jesus allows us finally to walk once and for all in full right relationship with God the Father. Perhaps one of the most quoted verses in the entirety of the Bible, John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." What that means is that Jesus laid down his life as the ultimate sacrifice so that we don't have to strive anymore the way that they did with all of these rules and rituals in the Old Testament, trying to get themselves into right relationship. Jesus took care of it so that we're able to what? To be with God the Father. So that we're able to be in relationship fully. So that we're able to be known and forgiven and loved and seen rightly before God the Father. The heart of being a disciple is being with God. And throughout the rest of this time in discipleship training class, we're going to talk about practicalities. We're going to talk about being disciples who make disciples who make disciples. But first and foremost, you've got to settle it for yourself here. That being a disciple is about being with God. Being a disciple is about being in relationship with him. Being a disciple is about pursuing and thriving in relationship with him. Throughout our time, we're also going to read this book called Master Plan of Evangelism. Incredible book. In chapter 2, it talks about association. It talks about being associated with Jesus. And on page 39, and 4 different parts, maybe it's 5, some slight highlights that you can see here in this one paragraph on page 39. And it's talking about Jesus calling his disciples. And he says, "Follow me, come and see, come ye after me, follow me." Over and over again, the cry of being a disciple is to be with God. To be in relationship with the Creator, to spend time with him, to devote our hearts, not just our time and our actions, but to devote our hearts to him. Would you join me in this journey of being a disciple? And what that means, the heart of it, is that we are people who long and walk out being in relationship with God. The heart of being a disciple is being with God. Can we lean in to that together? And declare that we are people holy in our hearts, devoted to relationship with God.